related to patriotism, suitably enough as tomorrow is July 4th, Independence Day. Yes, America is a great country, but it won't quite be a rah-rah USA, USA sort of talk necessarily. Not everybody has always had something to cheer about on Independence Day. Before all that, though, let's go through the preliminaries, a few announcements. The UUCO board met on Thursday and welcomed our new board member, Jim Cook. Did I pronounce Cook correctly? Coke, thank you. Okay. The board elected Dylan Zwick as president for the 2022-2023 church year and Chalice Gustafson as secretary. So congrats, you guys. Thank you for taking that on and good luck. Bill Hackett completed his time on the board and is board president. Thanks to Bill. Is Bill out there? No, not yet. Thanks to Bill for all his hard work and commitment to the church over the years. And today is his birthday, so happy birthday to him, long distance. And the building committee led by Karen Thurber met with realtors on Friday regarding the sale of the building. We're hoping to make a final decision soon, and we will keep you posted. Finally, we'll be joining the Unitarian Church in Salt Lake City next Sunday, but we're going to try watching the service here in Ogden. So anybody who would like to join us here is more than welcome. And here are a few items from All the News, the UUCO newsletter. More details are in the actual newsletter itself. Codger Coffee meets Fridays, 9:30 a.m. at Grounds for Coffee, 30th and Harrison. The UUCO Book Club meets the second Wednesday of each month at 7 p.m. And this month's discussion will be about Woman's Daughter by Kim Michelle Richardson. Okay. Book Woman's Daughter? Okay. There we go. By Kim Michelle Richardson. Thank you. At 6 p.m. The UU Church is an open, tolerant place where diversity of thought is encouraged and appreciated. Doesn't matter who you love or how you identify yourself. We come here because we want to think for ourselves, want space where we can ponder spiritual questions on our own terms. We ask questions, value the exchange of ideas, want to hear from others. There are a range of beliefs among those here. Generally, though, we believe in caring for the planet and caring for one another. We are a lay-led ministry, remember, which means the messages come from everyone here. Everyone here adds to the atmosphere, and we are glad you're all here. So tomorrow, we mark Independence Day, meaning we're reaching the heart of summer. I chose Faith in Summer by Ellen Hamilton as our chalice reading since it's a homage of sorts to the season, which is my favorite. In faith together, we light this small scrap of light, symbol of Grandfather Sun's enormous power, whose energy burns so brightly in these days of deep summer, catapulting the leaves and vines, vegetables, flowers, and fruits to astonishing size, lengths, and heights, spilling over the tops of cages, walls, and trellises, delighting and nourishing all beings. We bask in the warmth and the heat of these days with lightened hearts and quickened senses in gratitude and in faith. And now our chalice lighting words. Brent Johnson has agreed to light the chalice today, so come on up and give us a hand. And now the chalice lighting words should be in the order of service. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and for the energy of action. So thank you, Brent. Now our opening hymn. Opening hymn.
Can you raise your hand? Can you hear me okay? Can you raise your hand? Very good. Great. So please join us in singing hymn number 169, We Shall Overcome, into the Rain and Love. And since this is one we haven't often sung in the past, I'll play the whole hymn as an introduction.
Our reading today comes from What to the Slave is the 4th of July, written by Frederick Douglass. Douglass, an abolitionist born into slavery, gave the speech on July 5th, 1852, to the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society of Rochester, New York. It underscores the fact that freedom and independence weren't for everyone in the country's earlier days, notwithstanding the proclamations of the founding fathers. Slaves were the glaring exception of Douglass's time. Even now, efforts to perfect the United States continue, and independence is a different thing for different people. As Douglas Blight, author of a biography of Douglass and quoted by Time magazine in 2020, put it, Douglass's message about America struggling to live up to the lofty goals it set for itself at the founding continues to be relevant. Despite the critical tone, Douglass offered praiseworthy words for the founding fathers and those who took part in the American Revolution. I quote, "Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory." He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of the country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. But in some of the speech's most famous passages, Douglass decries the chasm between the ideas put forward in the Declaration of Independence and the reality of slaves at the time. And here I quote again, "What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn." What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. So pretty tough stuff, pretty strong stuff, worth considering. To be sure, slavery has been abolished, but in many respects, independence and freedom can still be fleeting things for some. Douglas's criticism isn't to say that the United States is a failure. It's to say that the fight for freedom, for independence, is an evolving, continuing, never-ending thing. You need to take intentional, conscious steps to get and maintain independence.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you very much to everyone who's joining us today. The subject of my talk today is patriotism. It's a reference, obviously, to Sergeant Pepper's. Another cover that represents the amalgamation of a moment and the past that made it so. An expression of triumph and hope, and the long road that led to it, with more roads still ahead. It's the cover of a magazine began in 1865 by abolitionists who, believing slavery's demise had not resolved our country's problems, hoped to continue the work of improvement. It publishes to this day. Its name, The Nation, is in fact a proposition sanguinely achieved in its first year of publication. The definite article of its first word asserting it is not these nations, but the nation. An assertion that we are and will be, for better or worse, one country. The nation to which the magazine refers and to which it is addressed is my own, our own. And the moment that this cover represents, I view it as a triumph of centuries of work to make that nation better. The work of tens of thousands, some depicted on the cover, who had seen within our country the possibility of something better and believed we had it within ourselves and in our system to make it so. In spite of my inherent skepticism, I'd always considered myself a patriot, a believer in the idea that our country, in spite of its manifest shames and flaws, both in its past and in its present, was something worth the work and worthy of celebration. The 4th of July celebrates the signing of the Declaration of Independence. John Adams, the man arguably most responsible for its existence, was so elated by this event that he declared its anniversary ought to be commemorated as the Day of Deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forever forward. He said, "You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is worth more than all the means, that posterity will triumph in that day's transaction, even though we may regret it, which I trust in God we shall not." Adam's wish has, more or less, come to pass. We remember that event each year with pomp and patriotic celebration, but I'm actually not certain of how pleased he'd be about it. Those who signed it are now viewed by many in our country as not just inspired, but as something akin to infallible superhuman demigods who all thought alike and provided answers not just to every problem of their day, but every problem for all time. A perception that would no doubt baffle them were they alive today.
Congress have commissioned me to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the birth of our proud republic. My humble rendition of this momentous scene, for what could have been more momentous in the history of our young nation than the signing of the Declaration of Independence, will hang in the rotunda of the Capitol. I offer it to you now for your delectation and, may I dare to hope, your approval.
Dead.
Sir?
All dead. A whole lot of them. Except for me and Jefferson.
Yes, sir. Does the painting do you justice?
Shin piece.
I beg your pardon?
A shin piece, sir. There's all legs and ankles. Yeah, I am informed that one of the greatest talents of a painter is the capability to comprehend a large space. Herr Rubens, whose canvases I always paused to admire when I was staying in Holland, was a master of this. You, Mr. Trumbull, I know Rubens.
I do not claim to be a Rubens, sir. I would, however, remind you that Herr Rubens never painted such a uniquely American subject.
As to the painting's singularity, I can offer no opinion. But I will say this. It is very bad history.
The likenesses have been very carefully
No
researched.
scenes such as you depict here ever took place. There was not one moment or one day when all the delegates from the Congress gathered to record their signatures.
This is a matter of detail.
May I remind you, sir, that we were already at war? So contrary to your tranquil scene, your subjects were scurrying in and out of Philadelphia all summer long, affixing their names to Mr. Jefferson's hallowed parchment whenever they happened to be in town.
You would not deny the artist a certain license.
Do not let our posterity be deluded with fictions under the guise of poetical or graphical licenses. You know, it is a very common observation in Europe, Mr. Trumbull, that nothing is so false as modern history. Well, I would hasten to add that nothing is so false as modern European history, except modern American history. In plain English, sir, I consider the true history of the American Revolution as lost.
No doubt, the irony of the scene depicted here never actually taking place was not lost upon the filmmakers. But what the John Adams character said there was true. The painting, as with so much of what we learn about the founding, is very bad history. And John Adams lived long enough to witness the beginnings of the hagiographies that now dominate our understanding of the founders. He died exactly 50 years to the day after July 4th, 1776. And in an absolutely astonishing quirk of history, the other man most responsible for the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson, did too. So what can we say about the Declaration of Independence? It was essentially a declaration of war, a declaration of rebellion, a declaration of treason. It was a declaration of revolution. Almost 250 years later, what can we say about this revolution? First, it was violent. Malcolm X was right when he said that there was nothing nonviolent about Patrick Henry or George Washington. The founding fathers responded to a system in which they were far less oppressed than many communities are within the United States today with lethal force. This is important to keep in mind, both because a celebration of this revolution should make those of us who believe in nonviolent resistance uneasy, and because even if we hold firm that nonviolence is the only acceptable means of protest, it should temper our blanket condemnation of destructive or even violent protests today. Second, it was conservative. The American Revolution did not so much upend the power structures of the time as acknowledge them. The colonies of the United States had already become self-sustaining and self-governing, and their revolution was supported and led by those who were in power when it started and who remained in power after its conclusion. Compared with, say, the French Revolution that it inspired, which overthrew and killed the king, or the Haitian Revolution, in which slaves overcame their colonial masters, the American Revolution is almost undeserving of the name. And the rights that it enshrined were not novel or uncommon ideas for its time. They were already enjoyed, more or less, by the colonists before the Revolution, and were so obvious and straightforward that many considered them to be self-evident. Third, and most significantly, it was blatantly and disgustingly hypocritical. The man who wrote that the proposition that all men are created equal and endowed with the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness owned human slaves at the time he wrote it and beyond until the day he died. The obvious contradiction has been pointed out by many, and even some at the time, who felt the revolution didn't go anywhere near far enough, and that if the fight for liberty did not entail the abolition of slavery, it was a failure and a fraud. In the words of Robert Ingersoll, when peace came, when the independence of a new nation was acknowledged, the great truth for which our fathers fought was half denied, and the Constitution was inconsistent with the Declaration. The war was waged for liberty, and yet the victors forged new fetters for their fellow man. The chains our fathers broke were put by them upon the limbs of others. Freedom for all was the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, through 7 years of want and war. In peace, the cloud was forgotten and the pillar blazed unseen. Let us be truthful. All our fathers were not true to themselves. In war, they had been generous, noble, and self-sacrificing. With peace came selfishness and greed. They were not great enough to appreciate the grandeur of the principles for which they fought. They ceased to regard the great truths as having universal application. Liberty for all included only themselves. They qualified the Declaration. They interpolated the word white. They obliterated the word all. Morally, of course, the American Revolution did not go far enough. But practically, could it have gone further? Thomas Paine, whose pamphlet Common Sense did more to persuade public opinion in favor of revolution than any other document, including the Declaration of Independence, believed that the ideals of the American Revolution were very much for export. And soon after the United States achieved its independence, he moved to Europe and became very involved in another revolution, this time in France. Edmund Burke was a member of the British Parliament who came as close to supporting the revolution as anybody in that legislature. He advocated support for the grievances of the colonists, argued against the British going to war against them, and admired the ideals and the government set up after independence. However, he broke sharply with Paine on the revolution in France. You see, Thomas Paine was an idealist. He was a pamphleteer whose great skill was expressing his ideals in plain and compelling language that inspired support. But he wasn't good at practicalities. Burke, on the other hand, understood more about the necessities of government, the requirements of order, and the dangers inherent in its breakdown. Burke published his opposition to the French Revolution in his Reflections on the Revolution in France, and Paine responded with his book, Rights of Man. While Thomas Paine is a hero of mine, I'll admit I think Burke got this one right. Radical idealism is a powerful and admirable thing, provided the ideals are just. But reality is such that those ideals cannot always be achieved, at least within a timeline acceptable to the idealists. This becomes a problem if idealists suddenly acquire power, and terrifying if they conclude the failure to manifest perfection is caused by the insufficient purity of the populace. Combine this with an ability and a willingness to use coercive violence, and you don't get utopia. You get the reign of terror. The French Revolution went too far. The American Revolution did not go far enough. However, it was still a step in the right direction, and it may have gone as far as was possible at the time. The revolution required the South, and to get that, the question of slavery had to be postponed. It kicked that absolutely critical problem down the road to later generations, a problem that in those intervening generations ruined the lives of millions of people and led to a disastrous war with casualties that dwarfed those of the revolution. The balance between how things should be and how they could be is a difficult one to strike. It was a problem not just for the revolution and its aftermath, but for the Civil War and its aftermath too. The problem expertly encapsulated in this scene from Steven Spielberg's 2012 movie, Lincoln. Striking the balance between idealism and practicality is a problem that we still face today. Doing our best to make our country, and by extension our world, better while managing this balance is how I would define patriotism. We can be proud of the noble aspects of our country and its accomplishments, but that is not what patriotism is. And the jingoistic pride that asserts superiority based upon the place where one was born is patriotism's debasement. Quoting Ingersoll again,
Going to the bathroom.
he loves his country best who strives to make it best. The bravest men are those who have the greatest fear of doing wrong. Mere politicians wish the country to do something for them. True patriots desire to do something for their country. Courage without conscience is a wild beast. And patriotism without principle is the prejudice of birth, the animal attachment to place. Now, patriotic is not the first word that I would use to describe Unitarians. In fact, it's not even on the first page. I think it's fair to say that patriotism isn't high on the list of virtues that we value. If anything, we're more skeptical than supportive of any patriotic feeling. But a proper approach to patriotism is inherent in our principles. Each of our principles is focused on the here and now and how we can make the world in which we find ourselves a better place. And our fifth principle gives us some direction on how to do it. The fifth principle is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. I'll admit, I'm not the patriot I was on January 20th, 2009. I've tried not to be naive, but I've always believed that hope and optimism are more effective than despair and cynicism, as long as you don't get too upset when things don't work out exactly as you wish. I've always tried to be optimistic about my country and hold to the idea that progress has been made and further progress is not only possible, but the natural course of history. My patriotism took a hit from which I don't think it will ever quite recover on the night of December 8th, 2016. To me, the election of Donald Trump was not just a disappointment, it was a violation. The country that I thought I loved turned out I did not know. The day after, I read an essay by Adam Gopnik titled "Talking to Kids About Trump's Victory," and its final paragraph resonated with me profoundly. He wrote, "The lesson of history, one of them anyway, is that there is no one-way arrow in it. That tragedy lurks around every corner. That the iceberg is there even as the mighty Titanic sails out, unsinkable. Having a tragic view of life is compatible with having a positive view of our worldly duties. This is a big and abstract thought to share with children, of course, and perhaps, like so many like it, it is teachable only as a pained and at this moment acutely pained, daily practice. That positive view of our worldly duties is the essence of patriotism. And that daily practice is how we can be patriotic. Learn from the idealists, even be one yourself, and try to think upon which situations that we find tolerable today will seem anathema to future generations. Perhaps it is our treatment of women or the transgendered, our criminal justice system, or our factory farms. The United States even has a colony in Puerto Rico with a population equal to that of the United States at the time of the revolution, who face injustices and inequalities at least on par with those faced by the British colonists in America almost 250 years ago. But understand that ideals without work are hollow. Do the work you can to manifest your ideals, but know the work is long, it can be frustrating and even thankless, and that compromise and imperfection are inevitable and acceptable. Doing the work is how to be a patriot, and the best way to celebrate our country on July 4th and every other day. Thank you.
Wow, way to go, Dylan.
Yeah, wow.
What a speech.
I got chilled.
Really?
Well, thank you, Dylan. Put a lot of work into that, a lot of good material in there. Thank you. Now we will shift gears to our offertory. Our words come from We Give by Kristen Collins.
Just the rest of the service. Yeah, we can.
We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. For those online, not sure how many are online, but you can donate to the church through the Breeze app, the Give Now button, or you can give at uuco.org. I think that still works. I know we've been working on the website. Select the donate button at the top of the screen. You can also send donations directly to the church. Now we will pass the basket. Sandy and Brent, whoever is willing, please. Come up. Guys. And simultaneously, we're going to handle the candles and stones ceremony. After the basket passes your row, you're invited to come forward to light a candle of hope, either side. And you may also wish to drop a stone of burden or forgiveness in the sacred gathered waters. Come up on either side of the pulpit, pass through, and then return through the center aisle to your seat. So just be careful with the fire and all that stuff. Now please stand, embody your voice, and facing the center aisle, sing together the offering song, which is printed in your order of service. And basket gatherers, come on up. From you. Thank you for giving. This money helps the church, helps us in our effort to improve the world in big ways and small. Now, our closing hymn, Joseph.
Let's see, there we go, there we go. Okay, so it was mentioned earlier how nice it is to see some of these old rituals coming back into the congregation. And one element that's always been a big part of our worship services has been the choir. And it's come up in the worship committee meetings that it would be really nice to bring back the choir. And that really brings a really vital energy into our services, as well as being a good way to get involved and meet other members of the congregation. So if you're interested in being part of that, just come talk to me after, and that way I can keep you updated about what's going on with the choir. And so our final hymn is number 116 in the Grave Hymnal, I'm on My Way. We'll sing verses 1, 4, and 5. And just so you know, verses 4 and 5 are down below the music notes.
Now, for our closing words, and thank you for putting up with this heat. It's kind of like a sauna in here. I start with a tough observation from Ariel Gray, writing for WBUR in Boston in 2019, that freedom in the United States isn't always for everybody, kind of a theme we've touched on. She pointed to the racism many have faced over the years in the United States, still face, including migrant kids being held at the time she wrote her piece on the US-Mexico border. She writes, racism has been codified again and again, from internment camps for Japanese Americans to the Chinese Exclusion Act. Putting migrant children in cages without reliable access to basic human necessities is the newest iteration of this great American sin. Now, I don't want to be a total downer. Enjoy Independence Day, spend it with friends, family, relax, but remember the fight for freedom, independence continues for many. We must work to preserve our own freedom, and we must be mindful of others who fight for their own freedom. Aid them on the way. Now we will extinguish the chalice. And please, the chalice extinguishing words should be in the order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, nor the energy of action. Thank you, everybody. Happy Independence Day and have a great week. That does it.